This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. I'm Lainey Liberty, and this is episode number 120. This evening, we're going to have a discussion exploring issues, concerns, and challenges specific to educating teens. While 95% of the human brain has developed by the age 6, scientists report the greatest growth spurts occur just around adolescence. What are these changes? How does the teenage and adult brains differ? And how do these changes affect learning and education? One question often asked is, why do teenagers seem so much more impulsive, so much less self-aware than grown-ups? Neuroscientist Sarah Jane Blakemore compares the prefrontal cortex in adolescents to that of adults to show us how typically teenage behavior is caused by the growing and developing brain. It will come as no surprise that the adolescent brain is often described as maturing. These are kind of labels for not so kind behaviors: mood swings, surliness, impulsivity, poor decisions, insensitivity, and more. Parents and teachers wish that lectures, rewards, and punishments would turn these difficult behaviors around. Neuroscience research can explain why they are a biological in origin and not behavioral in nature. The most important part to remember is that the adolescent brain is maturing. As the prefrontal cortex matures, teenagers can reason better, develop more control over impulses, and make judgments better. Adolescence is also a period of consolidation as the brain prunes away synapses and wraps white matter around other connections to stabilize and strengthen them. The cerebellum is in the back of the brain, and it's the part of the brain that changes most during the teen years and does not finish growing well into the 20s. In addition to controlling the physical coordination functions in the body, it also coordinates our cognitive processes and our thinking processes. Just like one can be physically clumsy, one can be mentally clumsy. And this ability to smooth out all the different intellectual processes to navigate the complicated social life of the teen and to get through these things smoothly and gracefully instead of lurching seems to be a function of the cerebellum. Tonight we'll approach the topic of educating teens from a variety of perspectives, both from within alternative education and conventional education. We'll explore a holistic approach, aspects of social learning, experiential learning, self-directed learning, and others. We'll also examine emotional well-being, mindfulness, sex positivity, and issues surrounding ADHD. We've got a lot to talk about and an amazing panel to explore these topics with. So we're going to jump right in. I'm going to read each of our panelists' bios, but I want to remind our audience more about each of our participants on the show notes page located at fortheloveoflearningshow.com, and look for the show notes page for episode number 120. There you will find more information about each of our panelists and links to their projects and websites. So tonight's first guest is Melissa. Melissa is a sex educator, social worker, and parent coach with over 10 years experience in the field of sexual health. She is a proud parent of 3 children, ages 4 to 19, and is passionate about the positive influence parents and caring adults can have on sexual health of youth. Melissa created Sex Positive Families in 2017 as a platform to offer pleasure-positive, shame-free education and support for families and professionals to strengthen sexual health talks with the children in their lives. Through Sex Positive Families, she facilitates workshops, speaks at conferences, creates sex positive online content, and hosts a podcast to teach the strategies for raising sexually healthy children. She currently also teaches comprehensive sex education to middle and high school students at charter schools in the Austin, Texas area. Melissa is an American Sexual Health Association ambassador and member of Sexual Health Alliance and Women of Sex Tech. Melissa is on a mission to shake the shame and trash the taboos around sexual health talks for families and to increase the confidence and competence of parents and caring adults. So welcome to tonight's panel, Melissa.
Thank you, Lainey. I am so happy to be here.
And we are so happy to have you. Next, I'd like to introduce Aparna. Having a decade of experience connecting with families in schools, hospitals, and nonprofit organizations, Aparna is a parent coach, teacher, mental health advocate, and motivational speaker. With her approachable nature, strong intuition, and problem-solving skills, she guides parents and children of all ages to empower themselves and build healthy relationships with one another authentically, through effective communication, confidence building, and light-hearted mindfulness techniques. She values authenticity, nature, motivation, love, compassion, gratitude, and humor as key components of a beautiful life. Welcome, Aparna.
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're part of tonight's panel.
I'm so happy to be here. It's wonderful. I can't wait.
Wonderful. Awesome.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce you. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Amy. Amy, an educator, author, and public speaker, is a powerful communicator of ideas and beliefs that can help us transform ourselves and the culture we live in. She began her own mindful practice 35 years ago and spent many years in in-depth exploration of contemplative and developmental philosophies and facilitating workshops around the world.
I think we've just lost Lainey, but I'm happy to be here and looking forward to tonight. It's going to be a great discussion tonight.
Amy, I'm so sorry my internet went out, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in greater detail. And I do want to say to the audience, Amy's been on For the Love of Learning show about, I think 3 times. This is your 3rd time here, and we so value the work that you do. So thank you for being a part of tonight's panel.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Next on tonight's panel is Sue. Sue is a wife and mom to 3 grown unschoolers, has 20 plus years of insights and experiences to share with us. Starting as a suburban family who discovered schools weren't going to be a good fit, they morphed into a family embracing all aspects of unschooling. Each of her kids, with their different personalities and interests, took their family on a variety of adventures over the years. Her kids are now 29, 27, and 24. Sue also published a book called Homeschooled Teens. If you have fears about the teen years, you'll want to read what 75 young people have to say as they answer all questions people have about homeschooling a teenager. Sue spends a lot of time coaching and mentoring families that are new on their homeschooling paths or further down the road but struggling to make it work. She shows them how life can be so much fuller and richer if they can shed their fears and the schoolish thoughts that hold them back. Her reassurance, knowledge, and ability to hone in on what parents really need help families step confidently into the lives they yearn for. So welcome back to the show tonight, Sue.
Thanks so much, Lainey. I'm excited to do it.
And finally, I'd like to introduce you to Yafa. Yafa specializes in helping ADHD families who have tried nearly everything and are still frustrated and confused by their child or their teen's blocked but brilliant brain. A true ADHD pioneer, Yafa is a 30-year veteran, teacher and school counselor, a positive discipline trainer, and the author of How to Train Your Parents in 6.5 Days and Getting Schooled, 102 practical tips for parents, teachers, counselors, and students about living and learning with ADHD. Her new project is Our ADHD Revolution, which inspires people to change the way we see ADHD. Welcome to tonight's show, Yafa.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
You're so very welcome. So I'm anxious. I'm done with the intros. I'm anxious to get this conversation started. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and Yafa will start with you. Tell me, why did your career focus on working with adolescents and teenagers, and how is it that the work that you do, how do you feel that's an important aspect to what they need as they develop?
Okay, so I started working with teens when I was 14. I was teaching bar and bat mitzvah kids how to read their Torah portions, and I've just always been fascinated with teens. Before I was a teenager, I just thought, like, they're the coolest people, like, on the planet, because they have their own language, they have their own music, they have their own clothes. It's like it's like this micro culture that's so awesome, and I just like hanging around teens because they're also the most honest people on earth, and it keeps me honest, and that's really important to me. It's really hard to fake it when you're around a teenager, and that's cool. Like, that makes me a better person. I worked in high school and middle school as a teacher and a school counselor, and I just, randomly was given as my first teaching assignment the at-risk kids. It was my first assignment, and I just loved it. I mean, I didn't want to work with anybody else. Much more interesting, I don't know, like, I have ADHD myself, and so when you're with people that are, like, charged and emotional and thinking all the time, it's just very exciting. I mean, my brain was super excited to be around people with so many ideas and possibilities and that sort of thing. Like they could go anywhere, and I wanted to go there with them, kind of thing. And so I just really have always really been fascinated and fond of teens. I think they're amazing. The thing with ADHD in teens is that I think I have a little different understanding than you, Lainey. But the way I learned was that the prefrontal cortex is the part that matures the last. That's the one in the 20s. And the prefrontal cortex is in charge of executive function. And executive function is where people with ADHD develop the slowest. So I like to say we're late bloomers. We're not non-bloomers. So what you've got with somebody who's a teenager is you've got that whole teenage restructuring thing going on, but also you've got ADHD. So all of the things that might have worked when the person was in elementary school or was a child, like a lot of ADHD kids are so smart that they can get through elementary school without putting in the work, without being super organized. But once you hit middle school or high school, all that stuff is more important than your brains. You have to be super organized and work really hard. Those are the people that get the good grades. And so once ADHD kids hit high school, they're at a loss a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times it's just a crisis moment, crisis with a little c, um, for somebody with ADHD. And what's happened, what you see when you like look at adults with ADHD who weren't diagnosed when they were kids is um, something happened in their adolescence and they kind of got lost, and then nobody was there to lift them up and take care of them and let them know that they're okay, and yeah, this sucks and it's like a double whammy, and no, this isn't fair, but you're going to get through it.
And so, Yafa, why don't you talk a little bit about how the work that you do, why you came to the place that working with teens and drove you to focus on working with teens and
Okay. Not a problem. Okay, I'm unmuted. Great. So I'll do a different version this time. Um, so I started working with teenagers when I was a teenager, and I've just since I was 14, I've always worked with teenagers. There were a couple of years where I didn't, and it was horrible. I thought I'm done, but then I came crying back, basically like I have to change my focus from, I was going to do women in transition. And then I was like, no, I miss the teens. Teenagers are the most interesting, the most honest, the like the truest, most authentic people you can be around as far as I'm concerned. And that's really important to me, to be around people that that hold me to a higher standard. Um, and they will. As soon as you get a teenager, you're going to be held to a higher standard. So I started as a teacher and a school counselor, and I started working in middle school and high school. And they gave me the at-risk kids, the ones that were causing problems, the ones that had learning disabilities. There was this sort of melting pot of economic disadvantage, learning disabilities, behavior stuff, and they were all in my classroom. And I had no idea what to do at first, and then it all came together. I mean, long story short, it all came together, and we just, I don't know, it was like this room full of love for the year, and it was amazing. And that's all I wanted, was to be with kids like that, kids that were not the stars, kids that were underappreciated, and just being able to say, I see you, and I'm going to show you who you are, was just really cool. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 23. I was one of the first adults to be diagnosed at a time when they thought it ends at adolescence. And then there was me, and it didn't end. It just kept going. So, and it's still going. It's like the Energizer Bunny. And so I started working with kids with ADHD around 84, 89, somewhere in there. And those 5 years, it's a mix of people. And I wanted to be the person that could show them, like someone had shown me when I was a teenager, that I was worth something, that I had a good brain. I wanted to be that for somebody else. And so the thing with ADHD and teenagers is that the prefrontal cortex, so your brain is developing sort of like this, and this is the last part to develop, the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of the executive function. And that is one of the things that people with ADHD have the hardest time with, is executive function. So planning, goal setting, follow through, all of those kinds of things. And so, so not only is it not working well with teenagers because it's developing, but it's even slower with kids with ADHD, because that's going to develop last anyway if you have ADHD. So, so a lot of the strengths that kids have as elementary school students, like we're smart enough to get through school when we're in elementary school, but once we hit middle school or high school, all of a sudden we have to be organized and we have to work hard, and we don't know how to be organized, and we don't know how to work hard because everything comes easy when you're gifted. And most ADHD kids are gifted. It's part and parcel of the thing. So, so what I do is I work with teenagers, and I'm that person that comes alongside them and comes alongside their parents and says, like, here are the tricks. Like, if there's a way to do this that's super easy and super fast, I'm going to find it and I'm going to share it with you, because slow and not efficient is not my style. So I spend my time when I'm coaching families with giving them tips on how to become better organized, but in a way that's not obnoxious, like in a fun way to be organized, like a fun way to get through stuff as quickly as possible and get it done. So that's what I do, and why I do it is teens are the biggest puzzle, and that's what interests me the most. Whatever the biggest puzzle is, that's where I want to be.
I love that. Yeah. And I think I feel the same way about working with teens. To me, like, it's the most incredibly dynamic, wonderful stage. And I get so energized working with teens. I love it. I absolutely love your story too. Thank you so much for sharing. I can't wait to get into it a little deeper throughout the show. But first, we're gonna move on over to Amy. Amy, like I said, you've been on the show several times before, and your focus primarily is mindfulness. My internet went out as I was introducing you, so I do invite you to introduce the work that you do, and then also share with our audience a little bit of why you're focusing on mindfulness with teens and why that is so important. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Lainey. And it's just such a pleasure to be here and to be learning from all these other very passionate and dedicated women, and to be able to share all of this with your listeners. I started a program called the Inner Strength Teen Mindfulness Program in the Inner Strength Foundation in 2014, and basically developed a 12-week curriculum which includes 7 evidence-based mindfulness tools, 300 million years of brain development in the adolescent brain, 50,000 years of cultural history and what that means about our experience now, and compassion building tools. We've trained over 4,000 students in the last 4 years in this 12-week in-school high school program. And it's growing. I mean, it's really beautiful to see what happens with these kids. I live in Philadelphia, and the program is running in the Philadelphia public schools. And 82% of our kids come from families who are at U.S. poverty level or below. That's $24,000 a year for a family of 4. So there's not much there. There aren't many resources. A lot of these kids that we work with are academically aspiring. And I had a really beautiful story just last week that one of my kids, who I've had 2 years in a row, is in the very challenging IB, International Baccalaureate program. And they have oral exams, which is like college level exams. And he comes from a relatively rough school, but good school, with a very caring staff. And I saw him and in the hallway as I was waiting for my other class, and he said something really incredible happened for him. He's always so nervous and never believes that he's ever going to be able to speak clearly or put 2 thoughts together or excel. And he always underplays his strength. And so before he walked into his orals on Shakespeare with a panel of teachers asking him questions, he started doing some of his mindfulness practices. He started doing the thought bubble, seeing what thoughts were there, letting them go, letting them all float away. And then he started doing the compassion meditation and sending himself love and telling himself, you've got this, you've got this. And he told me, he said, I walked in and I don't know what came out of me. I had so much fun. I was putting together things I'd never even thought of before. It was just coming out of my mouth. And he didn't have much more to say, but he didn't want to leave me. He just wanted to say, and he's this huge guy. He's about 6'3", you know, I'm only about 5'2". And we were standing about this close together in the hallway. And then I walked in and I saw the teacher, and before the next class came in, she said the most moving thing happened is this student came in and he was speaking at an advanced college level. She said, in my 20 years of teaching, I've never seen a kid speak that way. She said, I was crying at the end of his exams. And then I told her about the mindfulness, what he did. And then she started crying all over again. That's why I love empowering students with these tools, because they can access their own potential in ways that you can't show them. You can't like push them to that point of potential. It's a mystery where it comes from, but you can give them tools where they can really shine and respond, and it comes from themselves, and it gives them a type of confidence that's very humble. It's not arrogance, it's not overconfidence, but they feel empowered and in love with learning and in love with life. And that's really why I do this. My goal is to take all of the latest trauma-informed work and a lot of the healing practices that are coming out of that, a lot of the mindfulness practices, and to really be able to help students access this depth. So that's why I do it. And I guess why I do teens is because I started meditating when I was a teenager, and I was an unhappy teen in a school of 2,000 students, so I can relate to them.
Yeah, and I think all of us that do work with teens have that connection too. I think that's what drives us. Amy, wonderful. Thank you so much. What an incredible introduction. I'm so glad that you're part of the panel. When we put together this panel, I really wanted to have this diverse approach to educating teens. And although I come from the world of unschooling and experiential learning, I'm so grateful that we do have people that are passionate about teens from within the system, working from within the system. Thank you for being here. So
You're
great.
welcome.
Melissa, why don't we jump on over to you? I would love to hear your approach, and you know, the question is, why are you working with teens and sex positive? Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. This is the time in their development that this is important for them to be empowered. But tell me, what brought you to this work, and how have you witnessed the value of what you're doing with the teens themselves? The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So like you said, the teen years, and I like to refer to young people at this stage especially as emerging adults, because, you know, we are all sexual beings from the beginning, but often our sex negative cultures can struggle to accept that truth when it comes to our young people and our emerging adults. And so that can leave a lot of teens without the accurate and supportive and sex positive education that can help prepare them for having healthy sex lives and relationships. And so my motivation for working directly with youth and with teens and emerging adults comes from my own child. So my oldest child is now 19, and I have raised her within a sex positive culture because I've worked within the field of sexual health for my career in terms of being a social worker, working in HIV and sexually transmitted infections. And so as she's come up with a mother who is very sex positive, and we read books very early on about her body and about sex and where babies come from, and talked about gender and stereotypes. All of these things, I believe, are very important when it comes to helping to instill confidence in our young people so that they know how to how to take care of their bodies, and so they can expand out in the relationships and the intersections and the levels of intimacy that they look to have with others. And I do believe that it's really important and critical, especially in American culture, for our young girl-identified and women-identified children, because there are even greater sex-negative and conflicting messages that our young girls receive when it comes to their bodies and pleasure. And so that really was my motivation in terms of the shift a year ago in 2017 when I created Sex Positive Families, was because I saw that there were a lot of young people, and myself included when I was younger, who did not receive comprehensive sex education. It was a taboo topic in a lot of folks' homes. A lot of people may have learned about sex through being handed a book, by a caring adult who was less comfortable with broaching the conversations directly. There's a lot of trauma that can surface or be triggered by sex and sexual health discussions, because not everyone has experienced touch or intimacy or sex in a safe way. And so as I saw my daughter coming up in a very confident and informed way, and her decision making around her body and the relationships with the young people in her life, her peers, I saw the clear correlation, which research supports, that when we do provide our young people with information on their sexual health, and it's an ongoing early conversation, that they do make more informed choices about their bodies and their relationships. So as I saw that play out for my young person, I felt very called to want to help other families and parents who may be facing challenges in having these sexual health discussions. I wanted to help break down those barriers and create learning opportunities. And then now I'm teaching in classrooms with 7th through 9th graders. And so every week I get to have sexual health discussions and share specific content, and the space, it's just so beautiful because they're so curious, and it's not always safe in our culture, and depending on the families that they're living in, to talk about their curiosities. Porn is a big topic of discussion at these ages, and in our current culture, it's very accessible. And so it's great to be in space with our emerging adults where they know that it's safe to ask questions and that we're helping to prepare them for healthy sex lives.
Again, I love that everybody's story is coming from a very personal place of wanting to work with this age group. I commend you for the work that you're doing, Melissa. Amazing. Before we move on, while I've got your attention, I would like to hear a little bit about how the correlation between sex-positive education and consent play a part. And I know we'll get into more details later, but that's something that I really want to know about. Can you just talk a little bit about that before we move on?
Absolutely. So consent is a very important piece of comprehensive sex education. And as our culture and American culture recently has been, the Me Too movement has brought to the forefront, where a lot of our adults have experienced in their lifetime, in their sexual health journeys, violations of consent. And it's brought in the intricacies of gender and misogyny, and just the ways in which different messages have been received for boys, girls, men, and women when it comes to consent. And so it's really critical that our young people get the education around not just no means no, but that yes means yes, and that consent is something that needs to be affirmative, that it needs to be voluntary, and it needs to be conscious. And so these are big pieces of the sexual health messaging that we want to instill in them. And it very much starts at home, and it starts early, preteen, when they're children, when they're toddlers, we want to create a consent culture within our homes, so that children understand that their bodies are theirs and that no one has permission. They don't owe anyone anything when it comes to their bodies or intimacy. And so we can help support those messages in home. And so that's a lot of what I teach. I do a lot of speaking in terms of creating consent culture in homes, so that by the time they're teenagers, these are not new messages, and that the ways in which they're intersecting with their peers, and as they start to develop intimate relationships and partnerships with others, then they know how to check in order to ensure that consent is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk a little bit about preparing the home to support the education that each person is doing, especially like from mindfulness, sex, positive education, ADHD. Unschooling is all about the parents, and also about empowerment. Like, this is not happening in a vacuum. So I'm glad you brought that point up, and thank you for addressing consent, because I feel that's so important for this age group.
Thank you.
Sue, love you, Sue. You've been on the show. You're our guest host. You step in. You help me so much, and I just love the work that you do. Sue, talk a little bit about why you wrote the book, Homeschooling Teens, and what you've learned about raising your own three, and you're approaching it from outside the school system. So there's a little different sort of paradigm to talk about, and I'm curious, just floor's yours.
Okay, great. Well, I did the book because in the homeschooling community, it's not unusual that you would have everybody all for lots of play, everything's fine when kids are little, and then they get older and everybody gets a little panicky, and they're all like, oh gosh, they gotta buckle down. And what I discovered as my kids were growing up and moving into the teen years was they didn't really have to do that they could continue to play, that play really is the best way to learn across the board, no matter how old you are. And they will get the things that they need. And so the book came because I wanted to talk to a lot of other kids, young adults. I say kids, they were up to 39, But I wanted to talk to a lot of people who could explain what their teen years were like. Because when we would go to a conference, we would go to these panels where the teenagers would be talking, and the room was packed, all the way out to the door. And everybody wanted to pick their brain and ask questions and find out, what's it like? Am I going to ruin my kids if I do this? Are they going to hate me? All those kinds of questions that everybody kind of worries about. And so I thought, everybody can't go to a conference. Everybody can't have access to a panel of articulate young people. And so the book was able to do that. We took all those questions that people asked. How do you make friends? How do you learn? Can you get into college? How does that work? All those kinds of questions that people really wanted to know, and we asked them and they answered 75 of them. So that was kind of cool. And so I did that mainly because I wanted people to see that they have an alternative, that if school is not working for them, or they would like to focus more on play and less on academics, or even just following somebody else's path, because certainly lots of unschoolers are very academic. They decide they want to explore a certain path or have a certain career, and they go in a certain direction. But it's usually, and it's as unschoolers, it's driven by the interest as opposed to driven by some outside lesson plan that somebody else has decided is necessary for you to do in order to go from here to here to here to here. And so my work in coaching is to help parents, because they're the ones that have the hardest time with this, let go of the idea that you don't have to control it so tightly. Notice that that's really just fear. And any time that you let fear be in the driver's seat, you're going to have a problem. And raising teenagers is, listening to them and having a really great relationship with them, which is what unschooling parents are able to do because they're valuing the interests that the young people have. And that's what everybody wants. They just want to be heard. They just want to have what they're valuing or interested in not belittled or not put down or not shelved because this is important and your stuff isn't. And unschooling parents recognize that. And they know and they really trust that we're hardwired to learn. We're hardwired to be curious. And sometimes when kids come out of the school system and start unschooling, it takes a little while to undo that, because they've been so conditioned to think, no, somebody has to tell you what to do or you're doing it wrong, when there's so many ways to do things. And so usually it's a matter of helping the parents figure out how they're going to partner with their child, with their teenagers, so that they can have this full, rich life. And it's probably enough.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. And I thought it was so important to have the unschooler and the homeschooler's voice here. This is our 120th show on For the Love of Learning, and we still haven't come up with a solid definition of what education is. And so I think all of the things that we're talking about are all aspects of education. And so not one is more important than the other. They're all worthwhile to explore, and even exploring non-academic or outside of the system is super important to address as we're looking at educating teens. Thank you, Sue, for being here.
Glad to.
Awesome. And Aparna, we're going to jump on over to you next. Go ahead and share with us a little bit about where your work intersects with working with teens, and I can't wait to hear from you and hear your story as well.
Thank you, Lainey. So I'm here to talk about connection with parents and children. I do a lot of journaling and the usage of essential oils with families. And that's something that I incorporated into my life really in the past year and a half. Because for me, working with teens was really important because I was someone who, as a child, I was bullied for a very long time in my life. And those teenage years were really the most crucial time where, quite honestly, things hit rock bottom for me as a teenager. And so it's really important to, as a parent coach, to work with families and to work with teenagers so that they can really express themselves and find that connection with themselves. I do teach mindfulness techniques with meditation, but I focus a lot on self-care practices for both parents and children, as well as self-worth and self-love, as that is something that I have had to work on for myself. So it's great to be able to give back in that instance. Now with journaling, as a side note, I actually on top of the parent coaching and the speaking and everything, I teach free classes on the weekends to university students here at West Virginia University at a Center for Healing and those who are in recovery. And that's just something that came about because I have an older sibling who has gone through the process of recovery and is now 5 years clean and sober, and we're so proud of him, super proud of him. And so I was happy to find this center here, which does a lot of yoga and meditation and music and art therapy, and to incorporate practices like journaling and essential oils that have worked for me, and to sit there and have these great philosophical discussions on self-worth and anxiety and depression tied into their schooling and their academics and what's going on for them and how they're balancing that and having those boundaries and self-care practices. So with teenagers, that ties into with teenagers having that confidence and that empowerment to
to focus on your academics while also taking in what's going on in your environment, in your environment with your peers and your family, and having, having the strength to express yourself and connect with yourself, which may be a newer thing with incorporating mindfulness. But we do have educators such as Amy as well who are out there teaching these practices, so that we as humanity, we can find that stress relief. And so with journaling, there are different types of journals that I use. I use a journal called Practice You by a yoga instructor named Elena Brower. And I also found which is a more spiritual journal. But I found a journal at a store just with 300 writing prompts, which is more of a more for creativity, and I think for writers to expand their creative blocks and everything. And so it's important that journaling, it doesn't have to be going out and buying a book. You can sit there and write on a piece of paper, or you can draw it out, your thoughts. And it's, for me, it's really important, I think, for teenagers to get out the thoughts that are going on in their heads, right? I mean, journaling, I think, has really popped up a lot in the past couple of years. You'll see a lot of different journals in stores, and especially with even like adult coloring books and things like that, just creating that time for adults and children to access their inner child and to express themselves and let those feelings and thoughts out in a nice, creative, healthy way. And so that's what I do with the journaling. And one thing that's been really helpful is instilling a gratitude practice, which I definitely talk with families about, to create that sense of appreciation for what you do have. And it's really heartwarming to develop that sense of compassion and love as well. And so that's something that parents and children can work on together, in creating a sense of gratitude for what they have, so that they are focused on positive things in life. And it's been wonderful to. I'm a part of a Facebook group called 100 Days of Gratitude. We have about 2,500 people around the world who, and you'll find very easily that all of us will have things we are grateful for on our great days, especially, and our not so great days. And seeing how people, whether they write one gratitude, 3 gratitudes, a huge list, in video form, some people have gone live in the group to talk about how their day was. It's really a special, magical thing to create that sense of gratitude. So I encourage families to really have a practice where they can express themselves. And I work a lot on effective communication and healthy communication for parents and children. I think that's something we can agree on in general as humanity. It's really important to be able to express our thoughts in a way where we're not using our ego as much, and we're coming more from a loving, empowering place when we're communicating. And so lastly, the incorporation of essential oils has been really fun for me, totally accessing my inner child. And that's something that I started because I'm in working in preschools with toddlers and infants and preteen and not preteens, preschoolers. I'm a super sensory person. And so I, after working on that and starting this parent coaching business, Beauty and Parenting, I realized that, hey, this is a really great way to get back into using your senses and grounding yourself and being in the present moment. And, families can diffuse things in their home. They can just inhale things. And a lot of parents want to take take oils and products on travel to help with their health, or with, for me, I started using essential oils to manage my emotions. And so it really helped with anxious feelings and to elevate my mood as well. So there's a variety of ways in which I use essential oils for cooking, for emotions, my environment, my immune system, because my immune system, I was a very premature baby, so my immune system was not great my whole life. And my parents both had the flu this past winter at the same time. And thankfully, I think do these essential oils in a lot of my own practices with meditation and yoga, and being, just being out in nature and having that physical fitness, I was not able to get sick, which is fantastic for me. Finally, right? So, so it's been really nice to show these to families and how they can use them, because they're, I use essential oils for my skin, and I've used in specifically with teens, helping parents to manage their stress, helping teens to manage their hormones, and having this alternative to conventional traditional medicine. And I have no issues with conventional traditional medicine. There is a time and place for all of that. But just showing them that there's a different option that they can use out there. And I think we all know that essential oils are something that's really popping up right now, in general, for people to be able to use that. So I use doTERRA essential oils. Whatever anyone else wants to use, they totally can. I'm just happy to show these ways that worked for me, and to incorporate that in my parent coaching, and to talk about emotions and essential oils, and incorporating something plant-based as well, which is really fun. So that's what I'm here to talk about today, and that's I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. And I love that you ended up from also a very personal perspective and a personal story, which drives the work that you do. And I love that each person on our panel, including you brought in gratitude as something that you would utilize, and Amy brought in compassion, and Sue brought in play, and so we're bringing in aspects that are not necessarily defined as quote unquote academic, although that's a part of a teen's education too. So I'm so grateful that you're here, Aparna.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And before I'd open up a question to the whole panel, I just want to give, a brief introduction as to why this panel came about. I too work with teens, and I work with teens because of very personal reasons, which is, I have a teen son. We started, but it goes deeper than that. We've been traveling, and we started to incorporate community into learning, and social learning and experiential learning became a big part of our educational path. And we learned so much about building community, and about teamwork and consensus and leadership, and all of these things within community and within experiential learning environment as an unschooler who is traveling. So it's all of these other sort of modalities that became a part of it. But what I do want to say, and I'll probably interject a little bit during the conversation from my point of view, but what I do want to say from the personal aspects, growing up not having an attached parent, and having an attached childhood, that was something that working with teens helped me to heal and actually solve, because that was I did a lot of that personal work in my 20s and 30s, but to actually correct some of the dysfunction in my own childhood by working with teens to create a scenario and facilitate a healthy environment for teens became, for me, passion work as well. So I love everybody's personal stories and why they're driven to work with this really dynamic, diverse group of human beings at this stage in their lives. So thank you all. So here's my question. My question is, what are some of the challenges that you guys have noticed that are just so uniquely specific to the teen period, to the teen development? And whoever would like to chime in first. Yeah, I think you're on.
So one of the things that's very motivating for ADHD teens, aside from fun and ease, those two things are important, but one thing is leadership opportunities, the opportunity to have to not just have freedom, but to be a leader in not just decision making for their own lives, but decision making for things that family may do. Where are we going on vacation? What are we eating for dinner? I mean, anything from super simple to a little more complex. And that's extremely threatening for a lot of parents. They're very worried that the thing that's going to be chosen, like Sue was saying, can I do this? Is this going to ruin my kid, kind of thing? What if they're allowed to make their own decisions? Usually a lot of pushback I get is they're gonna crash and burn, usually about school. And so there's a conflict inherent in what I do of me saying, to affirm the ADHD in your child and to affirm that instead of making it a disorder or a deficit, you need to offer them opportunities to be a leader and teach them how to be a leader, show them what it means to be a leader. And then there's that fear of what if they screw up? What if the world blows up? It's projecting way into the future and it's a future that doesn't even exist. So I'm always like, if you're going to make something up, you might as well make it up that, something good. Like instead of making up that they're going to screw it up, make it up that they're going to succeed and they're going to be, world leaders and creative geniuses and, stuff like that. But that's, there's a lot of tension between a sort of natural inclinations of ADHD teens and this fear that they might take over.
I would just like to add that, sometimes as parents, we tend to think, okay, they did it right this time, so now I expect them to do it right all the way for the rest of their adolescence. And I think we forget that this is kind of this transition time where they're learning how to do stuff and they're testing things. And that doesn't mean just they're testing you in a adversarial way. They're testing themselves. They're trying to see, can I do this? What would this be like? And I think that sometimes parents can get their ego all wrapped up in it. And so they get into either a power struggle with them, or they are worried they're going to embarrass them, or, and I think it's really helpful to get clear on what's driving you, what as parents. And I speak from experience. I certainly had my moments like that, but I know that it just never really worked out well when I caved into that kind of an ego-driven type of a response. And, again, it's that fear and control. And we think that if we could just hold on tighter, if I just make this tighter, this will all go right. We want to control everything. And it's not our path. It's their path. And if we can remember that, that's the biggest gift we could give our adolescents, that they could understand that they'll make mistakes and you're the safety net. You're there to help them figure it out. And mistakes aren't the end of the world. Often they're so conditioned to think that if you fail, it's going to be like this life sentence. It's really just a mistake, time for an adjustment. And so I think that with the teenage years, everything's kind of amplified. And so we get a little panicky. And if we could just look at what's driving us as parents, then we can be a little more understanding with the teenagers. Harna, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that and say from the teen side that specifically also a challenge that I've found is teenagers finding that they're not able to keep up a practice, right? That's something that they're starting, whether that's a self-care practice or something related to self-worth or whatnot, a ritual, even meditation and mindfulness, and not being so hard on themselves, right? Because they have that pressure to, they're still in some sense finding their identity, right? And finding that independence amongst their peers. And so just, having that compassion when you do make mistakes, as she was saying, because I think it's on both sides to be really loving with ourselves and not operate from a fear or an ego-based perspective too. And so that's just a challenge, I think, with that self-worth of just being able to keep up that practice and knowing that it's okay if if you're not able to for a day or for however long, right? And that there are options when you can't as well. And yeah, that's what I wanted to contribute to that.
And Amy, did you want to chime in?
Sure. Some of the challenges that the teens face are brain-based. And the way the adolescent brain is developing, they're not able to register emotionally the negative long-term consequences of actions. So, if a teen has a conversation with a parent and says, if you stay out late at the party, I want you to call an Uber or call me and I'll come pick you up. Don't drive home with your friends. And the teen will be completely clear, totally agree with the parents. And then they're at the party, they're there, it doesn't really seem that bad, and they're trying to imagine what bad things could happen and they don't really see it. And then the way that adolescent brain is developing, their connectivity peer-to-peer registers more strongly. So their friends are telling them that it's okay. They drive home with their friend. It's too late. Their friend really isn't in any condition to drive. They get home. They're alone with the parent. The parent says, I thought we talked about this. Weren't you thinking about what could happen? And the kid's going, I was thinking about what could happen. But now that I'm with you, it makes sense, but I don't know why I did what I did. And that's very challenging for the teen, of course, for the parent and for their safety, but it's very challenging for them to understand that their brain is not going to emotionally register certain things. And so they're going to be inclined to make bad choices, not because they're rebellious, not because they're disrespectful, not because they think they know better, but simply because in certain moments they actually can't project the consequences in the way that they can when they're together with their parent one-on-one. And when you can start empowering teens with challenges like this, it really does help them understand without blaming themselves. This is actually a universal aspect of the development of the teenage brain. There are positive aspects to creativity and risk-taking, but they're going to need to build in actual safety mechanisms that they do, regardless of whether they feel it or not, because they may make the wrong choice. And so these are also developmentally based challenges that teens experience. And I think that the digital age has made it much harder because they have access to so much information. They have access also to situations that are beyond their maturity level, and they don't realize that the way they're taking in information or the way they're taking in some of the things that they're seeing on the internet are not the way an adult would take them in. They're not registering in the same way. And that can create a lot, pathways for a lot of bad decisions.
Yes, and just piggybacking off of that perfectly, I think that the unique challenge that teens have is that because they are individuals who are under the care, supervision of parents or caring adults, that like Sue mentioned, that ego part, it's really that parents may experience, or the fear-based and the need or desire to want to control the outcomes of our young people, and that it's really important that we as parents and caring adults find the opportunities to allow them to take risks, and because that is the way in which they will learn, and that they will be able to process the cause and effect of certain situations and find their footing in terms of autonomy and self-determination. And so we have to find a balance between, letting go and also being that touchstone, that safety net, helping them problem solve, think ahead. And so it's important to have a relationship that creates safe, non-judgmental, shame-free, ongoing conversations, so that they're not doing things, so that their risk isn't motivated by this curiosity that is from a place of not knowing, because discussions were avoided, or not had with them. And especially in terms of sexual health, a lot of times that happens, because of our culture, and also some parents, their levels of comfort in approaching these discussions, when we can talk with them openly and in a place from preparation when it comes to sexual health, then they tend to make more informed choices. And if they know that they can take that risk, and that failure might be a component of that, but that it's part of the learning process, then they can have healthier outcomes overall. So we just have to let go. And the teens are often at the mercy sometimes of whether parents, where they're at on the spectrum, their own parents or caring adults, in terms of comfort of letting go.
Yeah, this is so valuable. And we're going to go to break in just a minute, but I just want to add one of the things that I do in our retreats, in our community, is we talk about brain development. And it's the first time that for most of the teens that are on our retreats, it's the first time they realize that there's normalcy in their own processing, and they suddenly understand the biological process that they're going through, and it gives them this sigh of relief. And then we can talk about it in community from that perspective, and it gives us a point of reference. And so I think, Melissa, what you were talking about, by helping normalize these conversations in the home, especially around sexuality, and Amy, the brilliance of mindfulness and understanding the biological development, and also Sue talking about the ego. This is all so important. Everything is and everybody else, everything is so integrated, and it's not just educating a teen in a vacuum. I'll say it again. It's about the whole family. Anyway. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back in about 6 minutes. And I've enjoyed this conversation so far, and I can't wait to see what we talk about in the second hour. So we'll be back after this.
Being unhappy is never wholly to be recommended, but if there is any period of life in which the mood may be justified and in certain ways judged important, then it is roughly between the ages of 13 and 20. It is hard to imagine going on to have a successful or even somewhat contented next 6 decades if one has not been the beneficiary of a good deal of agonizing introspection and intense dislocation in this period. At the root of adolescent sorrow and rage is the recognition that life is hugely harder, more absurd, and less fulfilling than one could ever hitherto have suspected, or had been led to suppose by kindly representatives of the adult world. The sentimental protection of childhood falls away, and a range of searingly malevolent but profoundly important realizations strike. For a start, one recognizes that no one understands. That isn't quite true, but of course the more complicated any human being is, the less likely they are to be easily and immediately understood. Therefore, as a child develops into an adult, the chances of those around them exactly sympathizing with and swiftly grasping their inner condition necessarily decreases sharply. The first response of the teenager is to think themselves uniquely cursed, but the better eventual insight is that true connection with another person is possible yet astonishingly rare. This leads one to a number of important moves. Firstly, to a heightened and more appropriate gratitude towards anyone who does understand. Secondly, to greater efforts to make oneself understood. the sullen grunts of early adolescence can give way to the enormous eloquence of the poetry, diaries and songs of later teenagehood. The most beautiful pieces of communication humanity has ever produced have largely been the work of people who couldn't find anyone in the vicinity they could talk to. And lastly, the sense that one is different from other people, though it may be searingly problematic at the time, represents a critical moment when a new generation starts to probe at and selectively improve upon the existing order. To be 16 and find everything perfect just as it is would be a terrifyingly sterile position to adopt. A refusal to accept the folly, error and evil of the world is a precondition of later achievement. There really seems no alternative but to be miserable in mid-adolescence if one is to stand any chance of making a go of the rest of one's life. Another key realization of adolescence is that one hates one's parents. Yet it is truly an enormous tribute to the love and care of parents if their teenage children turn around and tell them at the top of their voice that they loathe them. It isn't a sign that something has gone wrong, it's evidence that the child knows they are loved. The really worrying teenagers aren't those who misbehave around their parents and take out their random misery on them. It's those who are so worried about not being loved they can't afford to put a foot wrong. To develop proper trust in other human beings, it can be deeply important to be able to test a few examples, to tell them the very worst things one can think of, and then watch them stick around and forgive one. You have to have a few goes at breaking love to believe it can be solid. And of course, one's parents really are rather annoying in many ways, but that too is an important realization. We would never leave home and become parents ourselves if we weren't at some level compensating for the problems, mistakes and vices we had first identified in our own parents at the age of 14 and a half. Another source of teenage sorrow is how many big questions suddenly fill one's mind, not least, what is the point of it all? This questioning too is vital. The sort of questions that adolescents raise tend to get a bad name, but that's more to do with how they answer them than with the questions themselves. What is the meaning of life? Why is there suffering? Why does capitalism not reward people more fairly? Adolescents are natural philosophers. The true end point of adolescence is not, as it's sometimes suggested, that one stops asking huge questions and just gets on with the day-to-day. It's that one acquires the resources and intelligence to build an entire life around the sort of big questions that first obsessed one at 17. Lastly, and most poignantly, teenagers tend to hate themselves. They hate the way they look, how they speak, the way they come across. It feels like the opposite of being loved, but in fact, these isolated, self-hating moments are the start of love. These feelings are what will, one day, be the bedrock of the ecstasy we'll feel in the presence of that rare partner who can accept and desire us back. Tenderness will mean nothing to us unless we first spent many nights alone, crying ourselves to sleep. Nature appears to have so arranged things that we really can't get to certain insights without suffering. The real distinction is between suffering with a purpose and suffering in vain. For all the horrors of adolescence, one of its glories is that the suffering it inflicts is largely securely rooted in some of the most crucial developments and realizations of adulthood. These fascinatingly miserable few years should be celebrated for offering us suffering at its best. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing. If you want more, why not visit us in person and attend a class, or take a look at our shop at the link on your screen now.
So we hope that you enjoyed that video. I went through so many videos to figure out what would be appropriate for the break. And that video was really presented from the teen experience, and I thought it was brilliant. So we do hope that that was meaningful to you in some way. We started off the show talking about brain development and how it informs the adolescent experience. And we've touched on all the different modalities and points of view that each of our panelists have. I want to shift gears a little bit now and address stress and anxiety as part of the teen experience. I know a lot of teens today are experiencing higher levels of anxiety, and with tools like mindfulness and other tools, I'm assuming also the essential oils are part of that, and meditation. Those would be great tools to address these issues. But I do want to talk about how anxiety and stress inform not only education and learning, but the overall perspective of the adolescent experience, also from the teen experience and from the experience of the parents. So how can we both support it and provide tools and address some of these issues and not sweep them under the rug? So Sue, why don't we jump on over to you first?
Okay. I do have a lot of clients whose teenagers have trouble with anxiety, and a lot of times they're trying to differentiate, is this just normal adolescent anxiety? Because that's fairly common. Even from the video, the little character looked pretty anxious a lot of the time. And how do you help them? Because it's painful to watch them going through a struggle like that. And oftentimes it's not enough to just say, you know, you can't sweep it away, because that almost makes it worse. Because if you say, oh, it's not that big a deal, who wants to have the problems minimized? You know, so better to listen to them and help them problem solve a little bit about how could this go differently. Okay, this time this happened, and these were the things that happened. You know, just kind of walk through it with them a little bit. That's helpful. And sometimes understanding and talking to them about, take a couple deep breaths, because we get on this fast pace that we got to solve it fast, and you don't have to solve it fast. You can take your time with it. And sometimes that pace elevates the anxiety. And you know, with anxiety, it narrows your window. You know, they can't always listen really well, whether it's learning in general or whether it's the parent trying to convey something to them. So don't be surprised if they're too anxious to really get a lot of that wonderful wisdom you have to give them. So you might have to repeat yourself. And but you have to really try to, from a parenting standpoint, to not convey your anxiety onto them, because that happens a lot too, that parents are anxious about scenarios. And kids, especially teenagers, they pick up on the slightest little thing. You've got this facial expression that's a little different, and they're like, what? They caught it. So you want to make sure that you're not giving them extra anxiety. So I'm eager to hear some of the other panelists and their suggestions about what they would recommend for parents and for teenagers on how they cope with anxiety.
I'd love to follow up with, there are a variety of tools in the toolkit that I give teens and that I also give teachers for them. Anxiety is a really interesting thing, and what works for one teen may not work for another. So mindfulness practices aren't a magic spell that will work for anything. They're not generic, and you really have to use them appropriately with teens and empower the teens with a variety of practices so that they can use the ones that work and not use the ones that don't work. Generally, when teens are very anxious, it helps them to ground in the body and with something bigger. So feel the force of gravity pulling you into your chair. Feel your feet in contact with the earth. Notice how your feet are resting on the earth. So these are they're being held by something large and they're being centered in their bodies. So their anxiety can be from a trauma trigger, something happened, it took them back to something that they're not even conscious of, but it's reenacting, it's playing out that same kind of fear. So getting them to ground in the present, they can use the breath. Mindfulness on the inhalation and the exhalation. For some teens, they find it very calming, and for some teens, it's anxiety provoking. So as a parent or mentor, instructor, you want to be very observant. So if teens start to become very agitated and breathing very erratically, immediately have them stop, immediately have them contact, their feet, the chair, what are you touching your hand? How does your hand feel? Is it soft? Is it rough? Bringing them back to sensory-based things like that. The other things that are very common sense for anxiety is getting the kids to at least put a digital dimmer, like the program called FLux, which they can download for free, which an hour before bed, it will decrease the negative. There's a certain light spectrum that causes a lot of agitation in the brain. If they're on their devices right before they go to sleep, their brain is going to be agitated by the light waves, let alone what they're watching, and that's going to make it hard for them to sleep. Hydration, making sure the kids are hydrated with water, not with high energy, Red Bulls and things like that. And good nutrition. Good nutrition can also help ground them quite a bit. And so when you empower them with choices, when you're feeling anxious, why don't you get some almonds and carrots? And notice the crunch. Notice how they feel. Notice the wetness of the carrots and the dryness of the almonds. They're both good. They're both good things that will give them enough flavor to put their attention on it. Good for the brain and good overall health. And the other mindfulness practice is a body scan, letting them relax their muscles from head down to the feet, letting the tension dissolve away, or breathing fresh oxygen into the different muscles and releasing out all the toxins, and just getting them to guide through the body in these simple ways I've seen a really good effect on many teens. It doesn't work for everyone, but those are a few very practical, hopefully useful things that you can try.
And so going off of what Amy said with the meditation and the mindfulness and staying present, I like to teach actually parents and teens a palm inhale with the essential oils, where when they're finding an oil that they like and that they're intuitively drawn to, they can put it on their hands and put their hands over their face and take some deep breaths, so that they're creating that a short couple minute ritual with themselves, even in the middle of their day, when they might feel that slump in the afternoon too, in the middle of their schooling or their work day as well, so that they're not so that like Amy said, not everything works for everyone, but they're finding something that works for them, and it doesn't have to cause even more stress if they can't do it as well in the middle of the, whenever they need to. And so being able to find these short practices has been really helpful, as well as I love to teach classes with both the parents and the children on essential oils, where they can find products that they are intuitively drawn to and create their own like rollerball blends, so that teenagers can put maybe like lavender or eucalyptus on the back of their neck to help them sleep. And so they're having that independence in that ritual as well. And so I use an emotions and essential oils wheel and a book that talks about, if you're anxious, that you can use things like lavender, you can use citrus oils to help motivate you, but there are definitely specific negative and positive emotions that have been shown to correspond with anxiety, such as using basil for fatigue. I know even my college students with this past winter with experiencing some seasonal depression and going for an oil such as basil that they're drawn to instead of maybe finding a blend too. And so there's that differentiation between finding a specific product that they like and making up a blend of their own that they can if they would like to. So lastly, the one major thing I've worked with university students, with teenagers, parents is organization and empowering yourself to be a leader in your life where you can go through your day and you can make your own to-do lists. You can relieve your own self of that stress and that anxiety by goal setting as well, right? When all these students have all these exams, especially the SATs and things like that, as they grow and into their senior year, taking that academic side of it or that professional side of it, if they're doing internships too, or if parents are working, and managing their day so that they not only have these self-care practices like essential oils and journaling and whatnot, but when they're going towards their career, their academics, they're taking it upon themselves to break things down so in ways that work for them so that they're relieving themselves of that, both that inner and that outer pressure to do things. And there's so many different ways that you can take larger goals that you have and break them down into steps that are more manageable too. So that's some of the work that I do specifically around all of that.
Well, following up on everybody, what everybody said, anxiety is a really big issue for people with ADHD. Anxiety and depression often co-occur with ADHD. ADHD often co-occurs with other things, and two of the biggest are anxiety and depression. So most of my clients have anxiety at the same time. And so I have several suggestions. One of the things, and this is obviously true of a lot of teens, not just teens with ADHD, but I like to talk about teens with ADHD as having big spirits and small bodies. You're stuck as a minor. You have very limited choices. And so what do you do when your spirit is calling you to do something bigger than you're allowed to do as a teenager? And so I like to look at kids with anxiety as being extra sensitive in every way that could possibly mean. And I love things like meditation, mindfulness practices, essential oils, journaling. All of those things potentially are good fits for kids with ADHD because they're gentle. And the kind of anxiety and anger that comes up with, that often comes up with kids with ADHD or kids with what's called oppositional defiant disorder. I call them angels, but whatever. They need a gentle approach. And so those are all really good solutions. Another thing that works there are these things called weighted blankets, WEIGHTED. So some people respond really well to having a weight on them. It does that grounding when they can't ground themselves, when they can't shut off the noise that's, while you're saying, okay, feel your feet, they're like, shut up, they're just freaking out. So for some people, something weighted can help. And some people respond really well to touch, to a hug, to snuggling, that kind of thing. I really like, and I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this, it's a brand name. Well, it's not a brand name, but it's called Rescue Remedy. It is bomb. Like, it is so fantastic. In some people, it can actually prevent panic attacks or anxiety attacks if you know like what that feels like before it's going to happen. They have formulas for adults and they have formulas for kids. it works so well. I really, really recommend it. What else I took notes. Another thing that happens with a lot of my clients is sometimes the child is having a meltdown or a tantrum or a episode of extreme anxiety because of the way the parent has approached them. Sometimes we get into a power struggle because we think it's, our job is to control our kids, and our job is not to control our kids, and pretty much hasn't been since they were like 2. It's to guide them and to show them how to be a leader in their own life. And so, but if you think that there's a power struggle going on, if you think that's your job, then you're going to be more likely to sort of engage in this battle back and forth. And so I like to talk about like just responding to your child, being present, letting them know that you're listening, as opposed to trying to correct them, trying to change the way they're thinking, showing them where they're wrong, trying to like one up them. I'm smarter than you are, you can't outsmart me kind of thing is just going to make it, make everything so much worse. And then the last thing I want to say is I think this is true of ADHD kids in particular. A lot of times kids are acting out because they want their parents to step up and be the parent. It's like, I can't do this, please handle this. Like, I don't know what to do. I need you to help me with this. And so if we as parents don't take it personally and we look at it as a cry for help, we're going to respond differently, presumably. If our child is desperate for our help, we're going to respond differently than if we think our child is attacking us. So I would really encourage parents to look at the times your child seems to be attacking you, move towards them instead of moving away from them.
Yes, that is perfect, Yapa. So I believe so strongly that partnering with our young people is a huge way that we can help in terms of anxious behaviors or anxiety. A lot of those tendencies can be rooted in fear or sometimes rooted in shame. And so when we establish a relationship with our young people, and again, that's early and that's ongoing ideally, then we really get to know them. We get to know what pleases them, what excites them, what lights them up, those things that really worry them. A lot of times during the teen years, there can be a lot of transitions. There can be transitions that are happening in the family. There can be transitions that are happening in their social circles. We talked about social media and just the constant influx of information and the comparisons that can happen, amongst youth in terms of, different social media platforms. And so they're just inundated with a lot of mixed messaging. And the more you establish a partnered relationship with your young person, the more attuned that you can be to the shifts that they may have, and checking in with them, getting in the habit of having regular discussions, knowing who their social circles are, and again, what are the hobbies that they have? What are the things that they really enjoy doing? Not that you enjoy for them, but that they enjoy, and really allow them to be in the driver's seat and ask a lot of questions. Ask and then listen. Because they need that level of affirmation. They need things to be normalized for them, to be acceptable, to be enough. And so when we have that partnership with them, then that's huge. And we talked about touch, so that they're not in skin hunger. But again, that can differ depending on the individual. So, some of our young people are, really respond to touch and closeness and cuddling. And sometimes we may move away from that. As they get older, we might think or assume that they need their space, and they, so that cuddling that we might have done with them when they were younger, if we're not careful, we might find ourselves moving away from that prematurely, and they may desire more of our time and more of our attention. And so I think, again, being in partnership and being in relationship with them can help us stay attuned as shifts are happening in their lives. And I think another really important component is modeling. So us as the parents and caring adults, how are we modeling our own self-care? How are we modeling boundaries that are healthy for us? How are we modeling prioritizing, our own emotions, right? And how we're showing them emotional management and emotional intelligence, because they're going to pick up on those things. And so there's definitely an opportunity for us to show by example some ways that they can navigate these different challenges. And they're going to look to us for that many times.
These are all really amazing strategies, and I'm grateful that there's a large variety of perspectives to draw from on this panel. I wanted to add a little bit from our experience, and Melissa, I'm glad that you talked about partnership, because that is the approach that we take. So I get teens for a month, and I get them, and we go to another country, and we live in community, and there's no escaping. So we've got our techniques, we've got the rituals that we do. We do our morning check-ins where our teens are accountable for declaring how they woke up, how they're feeling, what mood they're in. And oftentimes we get teens that are dealing with anxiety, and they're accountable to advocate for themselves. That's what they're feeling. They're accountable for their part in the community, their equal part in the community, to define how it is they're starting the day and how other people then can respond to that and support them if that's what they need. And then we do an evening circle, which is more of a reflection. This is what worked for me, this is what didn't work for me, and this is what changed for me. So having, again, working in partnership, because they're not telling me, I'm co-facilitating along with each person, and each person's opinion is equally important, more important than mine, actually. So, the empowerment to have accountability is generally something that they don't have in normal conventional life, or they don't have the opportunity to have. And so when they're hyperly empowered to be aware of how they're feeling and how they're doing, and define what they need, through the community, whether it's, being supported for stress or being left alone, right? Because that's a need too. That is important as well. So I get the teens for a month, and we have this hyper intense interaction, and they go away changed, and they've got tools, that they can carry into their life through that experience as well. So I just wanted to add my bit there too, because it's something that we approach as well. I want to talk about, before we run out of time, I want to talk about specifically parents in partnership. And so you talked about checking into your ego and expectations. We saw in the video that teens need for us to be the people, us as parents, not us as, now I'm speaking from the parent perspective. They need for us to be the ones that they can yell at, that they can test the boundaries with, that they can test, what the meaning of relationship and love is, in order to be able to come back to that. How can we support, as those that support teens, how can we support the parents to create a more, a better dialogue, and to check their egos out? It's impossible to say to a parent, well, you're coming from your place of ego, you've got a story. It's hard to say that without putting them on the defensive. And it's hard to tell a parent who's responding to a teen who is yelling at them not to respond. Like, how do we support parents that are supporting their teens. Anybody want to chime in on that one first?
I can hop in. I think it really helps to talk to other parents that are on this gentle parenting path. I think to have, sometimes you go to Facebook and you hear this really aggressive parenting and it's not going to work. All it's going to do is have more power struggles. And I think that to try to focus more with other parents that are taking this approach, because it's different than what we hear. We hear, show them who's boss and make sure that that they know where the boundary is, but in this like aggressive way, as opposed to letting them say what they need to say without having all kinds of consequences for it. Let them get it out and then figure out, let's problem solve this. And so the two things that I think that have been really helpful for me when that was happening with my kids, because I'm really volatile, so they're really volatile, and so you have to just kind of, okay, let's all take a breath. And so the two books that I really would love to recommend, and one was The 4 Agreements. It's so simple, and it talks about not taking things personally. And I just, to realize this is all about them. This is not about you. You don't need, you get okay with your parenting within you, not like as how do they act and now my parenting is okay. You feel good about the way you're doing it. Do it the way you want to do it. And then the other one is The Parent-Teen Breakthrough by Myra Kirschenbaum. And it's Parent-Teen Breakthrough, a relationship approach to parenting teenagers. It's an older book. It's got a lot of repetition in it, but she gives some really good some role modeling and dialogue that you can use. They say this, you could say this. And it's really helpful. It helped me a lot because sometimes you get triggered and you just can't even get out of it. And so when you realize that that this is not helping, you need to be the parent and set that aside. Take a deep breath, maybe talk to some other parents too. But those two books I would recommend. So.
Yeah, so I find that just like with anyone, no matter their age, that may be experiencing something challenging or something that's not working, being able to offer a space where they can speak their concerns, their worries, their feelings. Again, getting at from the parent, talking to the parent about, what are your fears? Because a lot of times this is rooted in different fears. And a lot of times we have had certain journeys, certain childhoods that we're trying to combat. We may project our experiences that we had and our fears that we had onto our young people. And we think that, we're wanting to protect them from certain adverse outcomes or negative or unhealthy or hurtful or painful experiences that we may have had. And so I believe that when parents have a space where they can, without shame, without taboo, they can openly kind of talk about and share what those fears are and have that normalized, have that be okay, and then get at the root of, okay, well, what is it that you really value? What is it that you're really looking to achieve in this? And have a gentle acknowledgement that, okay, well, is the path that you're taking now, is it working? Is that working, and is that in line with your goal? Because I do believe that most parents, right, really want what's best for their young people. And so if you just acknowledge that for them, and that it's not putting them in a place of feeling shamed because they're doing a bad job at parenting, then I think that can open up the opportunity, that can soften them and let them know again that this isn't about perfection. The parenting journey, it's something you just you just keep showing up to, and you give it your best. And then there's usually, hopefully, an opportunity to come back to things. If you had a difficult exchange with your team, there's always an opportunity to come back and apologize or to seek understanding. And so just reminding a parent of that they have that opportunity and that that's okay. I think that, again, offering that space for parents to feel, and like Sue said, to find community in with other parents and of teens can be really powerful.
Well, I am very blunt with parents because I'm very blunt. I mean, but what I say is we were taught wrong. We were taught wrong. So this isn't your fault. You're not the cause, but you are the solution. And, you know, to get into the solution is, it's really where to go. Instead of, I try to get parents away from the blame and the guilt, because it's so not helpful. It's just not helpful. I also would like to recommend my own book, How to Train Your Parents in 6.5 Days, is a book that's written for teens, but often like the parent will buy, or parents will buy one book and then the teen will buy the other book and they can work on it together. I'm a former teacher, so it's filled with exercises. It's not, and it's super teen friendly, like the formatting of it. It's not like straight text for, 1,200 pages. It's 150 pages. It's got pictures. It's got all kinds of really, it's like a fun book to read and a fun book to work on. And it works on understanding where the parent's coming from. And then the parent also can understand where the teen is coming from. But people don't always talk to teens about, like, what are your parents thinking when they're saying these weird things? So it's got that, and it's also got ways to connect, ways that parents and teens can connect over the exercises and compare notes and talk about some of the issues that come up. And it's probably one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life. So I recommend it. So.
With a lot of the parents of my teens, they're dealing with enormous stressors, and they need so much support. They really do. They're dealing with economic pressures. They're dealing with security, safety pressures, and they're dealing with their own trauma. They're dealing with relationship issues. They're dealing with a tremendous amount, and they take it out on their teens. And they also have fear for their teens, and so they try to keep their teens safe and get in battles with the teens, and then they kick the teens out, and the teens sometimes end up living on the streets because they can't reconcile with their parents. So it's the inner city world is tough for parents. So they need a place to be able to let off steam where they're not being told that they're bad parents, and where they're not trying to find solutions for systemic problems that are so much larger than them, but where they can really have safe spaces for support. And once they get that support, then they can get, some ways to also build bridges back when they've gotten, too hot-headed with their teens, or their teens have gotten too hot-headed with them, so that they can then find ways to mend those relationships for the sake of everyone involved. But there just need to be more safe spaces. And some of the schools, there are 21 community schools in my city right now, where those schools are adding more and more resources for the neighborhood, for the parents, for the teens that are learning their mental health, their physical health. And so the schools are now, it's an initiative by the Mayor's Office of Education. The schools are now becoming places where cross-generationally everyone is getting support, and that's helping to build bridges. So parents need a lot of understanding and a lot of support, and it also has to be culturally relevant. Yeah.
One of the other books that I wanted to recommend that has been really useful to me is The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain, Dr. Daniel Siegel. That's what I call my Bible as I work with teens. But one of the things, I mean, you'll learn a lot about the biology of adolescence, but one of the things that he brings into his books is real life scenarios, and he uses his life as a case study a lot of times. And he talks a lot about attachment, and he talks about maintaining attachment through the teen years. And I think that's vitally important to those people that pursued peaceful parenting or attachment parenting through their children's young years. A lot of times they believe that, we got to give up attachment. They're now a teenager. We got to move on. And this book really addresses how that affects the brain. And then the other thing that he talks about a lot in his book is, as a parent making mistakes, or as a facilitator making mistakes, it's important to repair. It's important to acknowledge and repair when you are in reactive mode, when your frontal cortex goes offline. When, it's important to acknowledge that you are fallible and human too, and look what I did, and let's repair this. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we can learn from all of these different modalities and all these wonderful resources. So yeah, give me a thumbs up. Anybody else on our panel want to add anything before we jump to final remarks? Yes? No? Okay, so like R2. Oh, okay. Aparna, you're up.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add in really quickly. I agree with all of these modalities in terms of working with parents and teens on any stressors or any struggles. One other thing I like to do with my clients is talk about writing out letters and things like that too. There are a lot of times where parents and children really need to write forgiveness letters as well. That takes when you get to the point where it takes a lot of that healing that comes from the childhood and everything like that too. And so it's important. I like to sit down and have the parents and the teens write them out separately or write them together if they want to, and then share them. And that communication level really, really helps to bring that bond even closer as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that.
No, you're welcome.
So important. I even do that in my own
Yeah,
I write letters to myself.
Exactly. Right.
Amazing. Thank you. We're going to go around to each of our panelists, and I'm going to ask you to share some closing remarks. And these would be to a parent who is struggling with whatever aspect of educating their teen. And it may not be from an education perspective. It may be from a support perspective. Whatever you got, share it. You're speaking to the parent now. And then after you share your closing remarks, please do share your projects, books, websites, whatever you're working on. And I will remind our audience that you can get all of the links at the show notes page. So yeah, let's do that. Final remarks and projects and websites. Who would like to go first?
I can. What I would say to a parent is that adolescence is your opportunity to shine, that you're being called to a higher level of competence and compassion and love. And it's scary. Like when you're called to do something at a higher level, it's scary. So your fear is completely normal. But look at it as this, this will change your life for the better. Let your child make mistakes, because it's better for them to make mistakes now than when they're in their 30s. It's really ugly when they're making teenage mistakes in their 30s. Don't be afraid of your teenager. just love the hell out of him or her, because honestly, that's what they need, and that's what they'll remember, and that's what will last a lifetime. And that's, my goal is for you to have a lifetime relationship with your child, with your teen. So that's what I would say. And the project that I'm most excited about is it's just launched, barely, but by the time you listen to this, it'll be on its way. It's our ADHD revolution. Basically, I'm pretty sick of ADHD being thought of as a deficit or a disorder. And so this is a community online. It's not like a Facebook group where everybody talks to each other. It's an educating format where I will share with you everything I know about how to talk to teachers, how to talk to school counselors, how to talk to your friends and your family that are putting down your child, how to talk to your child about what it means to live and learn and love with ADHD. So I hope you'll all check it out. It's ouradhdrevolution.com.
And so I, of course, will be coming from a sex-positive sexual health perspective with my final thoughts. I will just advocate for, again, the fact that we are all sexual beings, and as such, there certainly within the teen years, there can be some unique experiences that need to certainly be tended to and acknowledged from a sexual health perspective. When we talk about gender, and especially for our LGBTQ plus young people, an understanding of diversity and the gender spectrum, also of pleasure and the fact that it is a normal and healthy part of the experience for them to understand and get to know their bodies. I would say definitely certainly for our young girls, but definitely for our young boys and anyone in between, encourage them getting to know their bodies first. We would love for them to get to know their bodies first, to know what feels good before they can truly and healthily expand out into intimate relationships with others. That can help keep them safer and help give them the knowledge and awareness and skills around negotiating different aspects of intimacy with other people. So things like masturbation, again, perfectly normal, perfectly healthy. And so if there are any things that you as the parent are feeling triggered by or having a difficult time approaching or broaching with your young person, then you can get support around that. It's definitely not something that we want to avoid at this age, because then they may go seeking that out. And you don't want the world teaching your young people. You have that influence and that ability, and research shows that parents are the number one influencers in young people's eyes. It's not really their peers when it comes to sexual health. So take control of that opportunity, and storytelling. Storytelling can be a powerful tool. So getting clear and healing in terms of your own sexual health journey and experiences that you had in your upbringing, and find moments to connect with them in terms of what your journey has looked like to help normalize their experiences. And I would say that my website, sexpositivefamilies.com, has a wealth of information, books and videos. Those can be powerful tools when it comes to engaging our young people of all ages about sexual health, and it helps you not feel so much pressure in terms of feeling like you have to say everything or know everything right. So I encourage you to visit the website, and we've got a lot of in-home workshops that are going on locally and also expanding out to some online courses, so stay tuned for that.
So I would encourage parents to love themselves and love their kids, and to really feel the power of empathy, compassion, and just authentic joy and love. So I would really encourage parents to trust that. They may make mistakes with other things. They may not have been the world's greatest parents, but kids want to know that their parents love them, even if they haven't been the greatest parents. And parents often feel if they've made mistakes that they shouldn't or can't love their child until they rectified their mistakes and become perfect. And the child isn't waiting for that. The child wants the love first, and then the wrongs and deficiencies righted as they can in time. But that love as a foundation, not just in verbal expression, but as a constant. That's I think the most important thing. And then everything comes out of that. There's a lot of room for forgiveness and change and movement when that's there, and a child knows it and a parent has confidence in it. My website is innerstrengthfoundation.net, and I do train parents and teachers in both in self-care and to teach mindfulness tools to kids. If you're an educator and are wondering how to bring this to your school, you can reach me through innerstrengthfoundation.net. And I have a new book out called The Conscious Classroom, The Inner Strength System for Transforming the Teenage Mind. And it's not really a how-to. It's really a book that makes the link between teaching positive, holistic wellness techniques to kids and the outcomes that we want to see in the world. So why is mindfulness relevant when we have to deal with the global refugee crisis? Why is mindfulness contemplative practice relevant when we're looking at big issues like climate change? What is the link? Why is it important? And so it's a broad-ranging philosophical and lots of stories in it from the kids and from my own journey. So you can check it out. And on April 11th, the Kindle version is going to be just 99 cents. So April 11th, you can just go grab the Kindle version for less than $1. And I hope you do, and please do share that. That's you can feel free to spread that far and wide. So thank you.
I'd like to say to the parents out there that it's so important to take the time to stop and breathe, and to take those moments out of your day to take care of yourself, and to not be afraid to show up and be be a positive role model for your child as well. And that they do look up to you, and it is okay for them to also have those healthy boundaries where they are taking care of themselves as well. And so it's really important to open the lines of communication so that your teenager can help to manage their emotions and express themselves, and that they're not hesitating to come to you and to talk with you about the things going on in their lives. And so I really wish the best out there for families everywhere with connecting with themselves and connecting with one another. It's a beautiful, beautiful process. And that's why I named my website beautyinparenting.com. And if you go to beautyinparenting.com, I have a free e-guide on effective communication, which you receive if you sign up for my mailing list. And that's 5 tips on effective communication for families, and also on positive mindset and communicating with yourself as well, with affirmations and love languages and things like that. And I have other e-guides on self-love, 30 ways to access your inner child and have fun, and an e-guide up for families on essential oils as well. So they can have all of that information too right there in their short and sweet little PDFs that you can read on the go as well. And they're only $2.99 each. So I made them quite affordable for families. And one other thing is that I offer a free 30-minute consultation for my one-on-one coaching, online phone coaching. And right now I have a special offer for my sessions and my packages. So if you feel called, feel free to go to beautyandparenting.com and reach out to me for a free consultation, and we can definitely connect. And I look forward to connecting with you as well.
I think that the thing I would like to leave with parents is that the relationship matters more than anything, and that nothing, not grades, not sports, not back talk, none of that stuff matters as much as you connecting with them. So when what comes out of your mouth, is that going to help the connection or hurt the connection? And when you prioritize connecting with your kids, you'll be surprised at how many things kind of work themselves out. People want to be heard. And so I guess that's really my biggest tip for the end of this. My projects, I do have a retreat that I'm hosting in April in Galveston, Texas, and I have a couple more spots left for anybody that would like to come down and do workshops and get coached all weekend. It's kind of like unschooling immersion. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Everything's taken care of, and the link is at my website, SuePatterson.com. I also have another website, unschoolingmomtomom.com. That's with the two. And if you're curious about unschooling and you want to know how does that really work, could it work with teenagers, we have all kinds of links to articles and blog posts and videos and podcasts that can really help you understand it. And you know, the thing about all of this is that you get to modify things. You can make things how you need for your family. And remember, how we start as parents isn't always how we end. It's process. And so we may start by thinking we're going in a certain direction. And as we go that way, we can make a shift and we can adjust, and nothing is in stone. So just stay open, stay flexible to the ideas. Know that you're prioritizing the relationship and connecting, and I think that you'll be in really great shape. Also at SuePatterson.com, you can get a link to make an appointment. We could talk one-on-one if you're having trouble with this. And I have a really inexpensive group coaching program where we do a weekly call that's only $20 a month. So if you are interested in something like that, let's talk. Lainey, thanks.
You're welcome, and thank you to everybody on this panel. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you. It's been an honor. And thank you to Mel and Biggie over at Conscious Consumer Network. We're always grateful for the opportunity to broadcast on your network. It's an honor for us. And before we close out, I do want to say that if anybody is interested, anybody watching this is interested in contributing to the show, we would love to have another co-producer if you're interested to help us create shows, schedule guests, and host conversations. It's really important to put a library of information for free out into the world where these conversations are accessible and where we can discuss and explore ideas surrounding alternative education from all of these different perspectives, because there's not one way to educate a child, there's not one way to be a parent, and there's not one way to live a life. So I think the more that we continue in conversation, the more freedom and the more rich and the more support we'll feel for those of us that don't resonate with either just simply conventional choices or any choice for that matter. And I love what Sue said, pick and choose and modify and make it work. But you know, you gotta have access to the information first. So if anybody's interested, send us a message at our website for the Love of Learning show, and we'd love to talk to you. We're on our third year of producing shows, and we do this out of passion. Nobody gets paid. We're doing this because it's important to have this information out there. So thank you to our viewers. Thank you to Mel and Biggie. And thank you to Nina, who did not produce this show tonight, but who has been working really, really hard behind the scenes for over 3 years to make sure we've got quality discussions ready to have. So wherever you are and whatever you do, continue to always do it for the love of learning.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lady Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.